What's cranking, wieners? And welcome back to the channel. If you clicked on this video, then you're probably wondering one of two things. One of which, what's it gonna take to float 37 miles down a river, all the while fishing, camping, and then maybe even filming and documenting your experience? And maybe your other question is, how did we make it happen? And today I'm gonna give you guys a recap of our 37.5 mile float down the Brazos River, where we filmed for basically 4 days straight. It was in some ways very fun, but also other ways quite grueling. And hopefully after this video, you'll have a better idea to how to plan one of these trips yourself. Let's start off with probably the biggest question, and that is, what kayak did I float on this giant trip? This is a brand new kayak that was just sent to me about a week ago, and we had the pleasure of breaking this thing in just about immediately. This is a bona fide RVR 11.9. It is a kayak meant specifically for the trip that we went on. That is a river trip where you're gonna find a lot of fast moving current, maybe some solid runs, and potentially some chop. So I've been using bona fide kayaks for almost a half a decade now, and we actually had the opportunity to work with them on this project, which was a lot of fun. But usually in the past, I've floated a lot of these river systems down in Texas on a much bigger kayak, a 127, which basically equates to roughly close to a 13-foot kayak. Very big, very spacious. But this is my first time ever floating a large section of a Texas river in a kayak that was less than 12 feet. A couple things about this kayak that I like opposed to my previous one is that it is very, very light. On these big camping trips, when sometimes we have to portage through a wooded section, or we have got to carry this over some falls, it's nice to have a very light build. And this kayak, I believe, dry weight comes in around 85 pounds. So this kayak weighs far less than me, and it's very, very manageable. It's not one of those things where you're gonna have to be lugging it around. I think kayak fishing has very much become about how close can we get to an actual bass boat, and that includes weight, gear, and all this unnecessary goods. But I like to keep it simple. Everything that's in here I'm using to survive or fish and film with. So having something this light during this trip was ideal. It was really solid. I'm a huge fan of the RVR. Literally stands for river, and it is a much smaller build, which took some getting used to, but overall I think it was a pretty solid deal. If you guys want to check out this kayak too, I'll leave it linked down below. Like I said, they supported the channel and they made this trip happen, so show them some love. And if you're interested in purchasing a kayak, they've got some really good options, some less expensive ones, or if you want to go crazy, you can get like a 13-foot yak and use it on the big waters. But we were floating small sections of river, so this is the one that we chose, and this is the one that they sent us. All right, let's start with the bow. I'm gonna show you how we pack everything up and just kind of go over some of the essentials that I think you'll need if you wanna go on a trip like this. First and foremost, the most important thing, life vest. You could use one of those automatic inflatable ones. I've had those not work in the past, so I just went with a straight up inexpensive Walmart life vest that we actually picked up along the way, because of course I forgot them at home. Also on the front too, we've got some old rope, tried and true rope. It's about maybe, I don't know, 10 feet of it, which you definitely want to always have rope on these trips, and I keep it attached to my yak at all times. So if you've got to pull this through a skinny section opposed to walking it and bending down low, this rope comes into play. And we've actually had to use the rope on the Devil's River to basically lower our kayak over some falls. It was an area in which we could not flow over. It was too steep, so we've used rope in the past to kind of pulley this giant kayak, or a kayak similar to this, down over a cliff. So rope is huge and essential, and I always keep it tied up to the front. These grab bars on these kayaks are super, super sturdy. I've never had any of them go out. Every bona fide, for the most part, that is meant for fishing comes with these awesome little waterproof cases, and these are super clutch. So in here, I originally had my phone, my wallet, my keys. This stays watertight, and if I were to flip my kayak, I'm not gonna lose a dry box. This thing is literally attached to the kayak, which is really nice. Again, extra rope. Carry a multi-tool in here with a screwdriver, pliers, knife. That's very important. I got these Velcro straps too, just for, you know, camping needs, little tiny bungees, flint. I always try to carry many different sources to make fire. So, you know, a couple lighters, waterproof matches. This is a Zippo flint set. So if things get really desperate, we've got that. Another little multi-tool set. Just anything that I think I'll need, you know, or that I potentially don't have to use or don't want to use, I have to put in here. And there's a ton of space. And two, this is also an area where you can put a pedal drive, and I also believe potentially a trolling motor. So this can remove and come out if you don't want it, and you can set in a pedal drive so you can actually propulse yourself through a mechanism that I believe Bonafide makes as well. Super clutch. I love how most of their kayaks come with this thing. This is kind of the standing area of the platform. Every one of these kayaks too comes with this nice like sea deck type material, which is really solid because we had a couple days on this float that were hot, like, you know, 90 degrees, 100 degrees, and there's nothing worse than stepping on hot plastic. But these stay cool. They don't only look nice, but they actually are functional. This is super comfortable stuff. It's soft to the touch, and it will keep your feet from absolutely scorching in that hot Texas sun. They actually even put them on the footrest too. So you've got these little footrests here that you can use to leverage while you're paddling. This kayak also comes with a track system, so you can kind of customize and put whatever you want on here. I've got like a little tie down area if I need to winch down gear. I've also got this retractable scissor set for, you know, retying and cutting. This comes all the way out, and I'm not gonna lose it too. Just about anything you put on this kayak is liable to come off at some point. So I try to keep all my little tools and anything that's essential throughout that 4-day float attached to the yak. I've also got this paddle holder right here, which boom, goes in place just like that. If I just wanna fish and not have to worry about my paddle flying off, which it tends to do, it stays in place perfectly. While we're on the topic, this paddle is Bending Branches. I've had this forever. It's a very lightweight, very comfortable paddle. It's important to have something that is super ergonomical and that it is not gonna wear and tear your hands because you will be doing a lot of paddling. This trip especially, we paddled into some really nasty wind and we didn't have that pedal drive to help us out in some of those deeper stretches of the river. So it was a trip that involved a lot of rowing, a lot of paddling. Therefore, it was nice to have a solid paddle that wasn't gonna wear your hands out. I've actually got some wear on the thumbs. It's already starting to heal, but that is just the tax that you pay when you go on these kind of trips. You're gonna have some bumps and bruises. Anyway, let's keep moving on. This is the seat that comes with the Bonafide. Very comfortable. They actually even sent this nice little plush backrest, which definitely came into play. I was mostly fishing sitting down this trip. It definitely helped on the wear and tear of my old back. I'm a father now, so I think once you become a dad, everything starts aching and hurting. Under this seat too, which by the way is raised, it's not quite a sit on top yak, but it is raised. But underneath the seat, I've got my Bass Mafia bag that is full of extra line. So I've got, you know, leader material in here. Let's see if I can get this unzipped with one hand. I've got my leader material in here. I've got an extra reel, like a 300 size reel for big stripers, which unfortunately we did not run into, you know, 16-pound leader material, or if I get spooled on something or if I need to re-spool, I've got some big spools of line too. It's always good to come prepared, and that's something that I'll keep reiterating throughout this trip. I've been there. There's nothing worse than, you know, like losing the one lure that they're biting on and not having another one, or running out of line and not having an extra spool to rely on, and being in the middle of nowhere, no access to anything. So I try to pack smart, pack light, but always bring like maybe one extra of something that I think I will use. And line is very essential. You will probably get spooled on line. You get snagged on a limb, you go down the current, you can't stop yourself, and then boom, your spool's gone. Believe me, it's happened, and I'm speaking from experience. So behind my seat are all my camping essentials. I've got my dry bag right here, which is basically a backpack. This 100% is waterproof and will float. I keep my clothes. I've got a little foldable pillow in here. It was very hot, so we didn't bring covers, but I did bring some sheets, which is just enough to kind of cover my legs if it does get a little cool and damp at night. And then, you know, I've got my sun shirts in here, shorts. I think I packed like 3 shirts, 3 pants, 1 pair of socks, and like 4 pairs of underwear. And that was about it in an all fit in this bag. I was able to keep my laptop in here as well too, so it stays watertight and away from the elements. Behind that, we've got like this little table, which may not seem essential, but for us when we're editing with the computer and dumping footage every night, this is quite nice. It is not a necessity if you're going on a trip, but for us, it really did help to keep gear off the ground. And this particular one is just something I found at Bass Pro Shop. I was originally at REI and I found a table very similar to this one. It was like, I think 80 bucks, which is just absolutely insane. I held out on it, went to Bass Pro Shops, and of course they had like a $15 foldable table, which is very nice. Under that, I've got my sleeping arrangements here. I've got like a self-inflating bed. I kind of splurged on this a little bit. A lot of the areas that we stopped to camp were, as you might guess, probably not the nicest sleeping situation. So there were some nights we had to sleep on some rocks, some coarse bottom, and therefore it's nice to have something like this, like a self-inflating mattress. It's not even a mattress, it's like a pad, honestly. To call it a mattress is a gross overstatement, but a nice little pad, and it's just enough to kind of keep your back rested and keep you fresh for the mornings. I have this in here too. It's not waterproof, but if it gets wet, it's no big deal. So these two stayed on top of each other. And then behind that, we've got all my tackle. This is literally all the gear that I brought during this trip. I brought a giant Guggen Squad money bag full of just about everything you can think of. Saucy Slimmers, which are the skinnier version of the Saucy Slimmer. This is a 4-inch size. We use that quite a bit. I got big worms because it is summer. And ideally, I figured they were going to be eating big worms, but they weren't. We caught them on just about everything other than that. Of course, you always got to stay strapped with some Guggen Lunker Logs, 5-inch size, and one of my favorite colors. This is cinnamon. Great clear water color. Didn't end up breaking this out, but this is kind of like one of those Plan Z lures if they're not eating anything else. Also got a couple of darts, which we actually caught quite a few fish on. This was a key lure in some of the skinnier, faster moving sections where those bass were feeding on tiny bait. So we were rigging these weightless style, and they were absolutely loving that. Kraken craw, which we were Texas rigging and did get quite a few bites and strikes on that as well. So all my soft plastics stay like right here, and this bag is very nice because it will float if it does go overboard, and it's just a super easy way to store your soft plastics opposed to have them loose. Granted, I do have some loose plastics down here, but that's just from the end of the trip. Also in here too, we've got some cheapo pliers which stay up front. I actually just keep those right in little scup holes, and they work perfectly there. We've got a big box of swim baits. We didn't end up using too many of these, but we did catch some solid bass on the swim baits this trip. So I went a little overkill on the swim baits. It's a very swim baity river, although they just weren't cooperating. This box is full of just a myriad of different baits. There's nothing specific in here. I've got jigs, deep diving crankbaits, jerkbaits are super important on these river trips because anywhere you find current, it's good to have a suspending or a floating rip bait. Some topwater, some big spooks, some prop baits. One of my favorite topwater lures ever, that being the all black blooper. Caught a couple fish on that as well. Crankbaits, frogs. They weren't on the frog bite, which was so weird. I don't think we caught a single fish on the frog. Bladed jigs with the happy trailer on the back. You know, just like kind of a hodgepodge of different stuff, but it all fits in this waterproof, I think it's a 375 icebox tray. And next to that too, I also brought some catfish and gar gear. We didn't end up catching any big gar, nor did we see any, which is weird, but I got some big heavy weights in here for catfishing, some oddball bass stuff. As you can tell, I don't really have a system, nor am I very organized, but it's all there. You know, at least I know that it's somewhere in the yak, and I can easily access it back here. Cool. And the other cool thing about this big box that all my tackle is stored in is it's actually like a souped up milk crate. I remember back in the day when I first got my kayak, I basically used a milk crate to store all of my tackle. And what this is a specifically designed crate for fishing. It actually latches shut, so you're not going to lose anything while you're ripping down a fast area. There we go. Latches straight down, so all my gear stays in one place. Super, super important on these trips that you have everything locked down. If you tip or you fall over, which is very likely, you don't want to lose all of your tackle because you may have like 2 or 3 days of good fishing and no gear. On this crate too, there's rod holders. You can fit a total of 6 rods in this holder, which is plenty. And that's pretty much all I brought. I brought a swim bait rod, a topwater rod, I think 1 spinning rod, 1 finesse spinning rod, a jig rod, a big worm rod, and then my last rod, I think, I kind of forget. Oh, I brought like a reaction rod for like crankbaits and jerkbaits. So this is really nice. I'd highly recommend this. This is a USA made product. I think this company's called Yak Attack, and I've had this for a couple years now and 0 complaints. I have no interest in switching to anything else. Moving along, this is quite the eyesore, but it is the most important part of any river float that requires a couple days of paddling. This looks like it's full of petrol or diesel, but this is actually how we carried all of our water. This is a 5.5 gallon drum, and this amount was good enough just for me for 4 days. Granted, I did not conserve this trip. I definitely should have probably watched my water intake, but that's why I wanted to bring more water than less. So I had one 5.5 gallon drum, and Caleb had another on his kayak. By the way, Caleb was on this trip, of course, filming and documenting this whole experience as well. So we had plenty of water. Let's talk about this. This is Something that I didn't think I would ever really need nor use, but after going down and doing a lot of these trips in the past, I finally splurged and ended up getting one of these shallow water anchors. I didn't know how I was gonna like the whole anchor on the trip just because I'm all about less is more, but this is a case in which I'm willing to add a little extra weight and a little bit extra technicalness. That's not a word, is it? But I just made it a word. I wanted to take a little more technical approach for this float, so therefore we attached this micro anchor, which is completely electric. So you got two options to power this thing, one of which is you can purchase a detachable and retachable battery, which you charge separately. I thought it was only gonna last a couple days, ended up lasting us the entire trip. So just this little battery right here was good enough for PowerPoint in different stretches of the river throughout 4 days, which I'm really impressed with. Now, I also included this cable right here, which connects to a 12-volt battery. I had a 12-volt 24-amp-hour battery, which is quite small. That was kind of a plan B, and I didn't even end up using it. So pretty clutch that we just used the battery, and I actually brought an extra one. So I had 2 of these little batteries to power the power pole, and the power pole goes all the way up here. I don't know how tall it is, I think it's like 9 foot, but it worked in some of the deeper stretches. If I wanted to slow down and fish, I would just press the button, which I'll show you up there. There's an up, down, and there's 2 other red buttons. I'm not sure what they do, but I just used up and down, obviously. This is drilled straight to the yak, of course, which is not gonna go anywhere. Next to that too, I've got this grip right here. This is not something that you absolutely need on these trips, but again, one of those things I recommend, especially when filming too. There'd be times where I'd catch a fish and I'd be far away from Caleb and I didn't want to keep the fish out of the water. So I would just grip this right to a fish's lip, like so, drop him in the water so that fish stayed cool, it wouldn't suffocate, and we were able to paddle on over to a beach and document the fish, photograph it and video it in all of its glory, and then release him. That's something that is quite nice if like you've got a buddy that you want to have take your picture, but maybe he's like a couple 100 yards away from you. You can just kind of clip your fish there and not have to worry about losing him. Although there was that one time. It is hot out here. I cannot believe we camped in this. This is some insane heat. Anyway, let's talk food. How did we eat? So you can go about eating a couple different ways in the river. One of which you can go full caveman style. You can essentially cook and eat what you catch, which we thought about doing. However, there were some points in this trip where we weren't catching fish, so it was good that we definitely brought some of these. These are basically MREs. They're packed and loaded full of protein, calories, and one of these, or even like 2 of these a day, is plenty enough to keep you energized and fueled while you're paddling, while you're rowing, while you're sweating and burning calories out on the water. There's a bunch of different flavors. Some were good rather than others. If you haven't seen the actual video where we float and go down this river, you should check it out, because every day we went and reviewed one of these freeze-dried meals. Some of them absolutely sucked, but I was surprised by a couple other ones. This is one that's probably safe. You can usually tell if it's gonna be safe or not. When they start getting fancy where it's like lobster bisque and scallop risotto, it's like, dude, that's a miss. Don't even try to eat that. But if it's like pastas, if it's like something hearty like gravy and biscuits, or maybe ground up sausage, that kind of stuff is usually a win, and it's gonna taste really good. We had, I think, 2 of these per person each day. So if you do the math, that is roughly 8 per person. So I think we packed 16 or maybe a little bit over just in case. So we had like 18 of these on our kayak. But these are nice though, because you don't wanna bring a big cooler with ice and like bring hot dogs and hamburgers. It will obviously go bad. Coolers are heavy, ice is unreliable, especially in the heat. So these are probably your best option. All you need to do is boil water, put the hot water in this, mix it around, 10 minutes pass, and you have a meal. Bone apple tit. All right, moving on to some other important things I feel like I should touch on this trip, some things that I would recommend packing, especially on the topic of food and things of that nature. This is all logistical stuff that I think is very important. It's not 100% a necessity, but I would recommend it. So over here, I've got another one of those Guggen money bags, which is intended for baits, but I like using it for all of my cooking gear. So in this little bag here, I've got my pot, which we use to boil the water that we use for those MREs, those freeze-dried meals. There was some times where we lit a fire and we're able to boil that water that way, but a nice reliable way to just have fire on demand is to get one of these Isopro cans and to have one of these Coleman little cooking tops on here. So all you need to do is turn that handle, get the gas running, and then you light that, and this thing burns red hot. I would actually say blue hot, and it will boil your water very fast. And speaking of hot water too, we of course brought some Enfuego, some coffee. I've got a little coffee grinder in here. This is definitely a luxury that's not a necessity, but I like a little caffeine in the morning. And if for whatever reason we're not feeling the mood for coffee, I got some energy pouches too. Got some tahini in there as well. which, you know, you always got to have a little mini tahine in this bag too. I've got a knife sharpener. I've got a thermocell to keep the bugs away. And then right here is my little coffee bean grinder. I always try to pack extra bungees. This is how we keep everything tied down. You can use tiny wind straps. I don't like using wind straps because they get rusted, but these are really nice. They're reliable. If you just so happens to unfortunately lose one, it's not the end of the world. Here's another like foldable sleeping pad. This is just a little extra reinforcement for your back when you're aching at night and you just want to get some good Z's. I'd put this under my sleeping pad. A little tiny addition like that can make a world of difference, especially when you're sleeping. It is very important to have a good night's sleep out in the river, so that way you feel fresh and ready to go crank some bass in the morning. And then lastly, here's another thing that is probably not a necessity for some of you guys out here, but it was for us to keep camera gear charged. That is definitely one of the biggest hurdles to overcome on the river, because obviously we don't have electricity and we can't bring a generator because generators are big, then you got to bring gas and it's just an absolute headache. So we brought these little tiny portable battery banks, and they're super nice. They charge computers while we're dumping footage. They charge camera gear. If you want, you can charge your phone, but they've got 2 USBs right there, and then on top too, it tells you how much battery you have. Right now it's dead because we ran her dry. We actually packed, I think, just one of these, and it was enough for 4 days of charging and filming. The last thing I want to touch on that may not seem like a very important thing to talk about, but it is for me, and this is one item that I never ever forget when I'm out on the river, are these guys right here. You've probably seen me wear these in a lot of different videos, especially on these kayak trips. They look goofy as all hell, and I've had them for probably like 7 years now, but these are water shoes. It is super important to have some sort of comfortable but yet sturdy water shoes when you're on these river sends. There's gonna be rocks. There's gonna be areas where you're gonna have to dredge your kayak, where you're not gonna be floating. It's not gonna be nice. There's gonna be no current. There was one float, quote unquote float, that we did last year that was on the Guadalupe, and there was a section of the river that was literally completely dry. So having some shoes like that that are waterproof, that are still comfortable and that aren't gonna slide off your feet, that you're gonna have leverage with when you're pulling all your heavy gear, is very important. I think these are Keens. I don't know if Keen still makes these, but they've lasted me forever, and they look so dorky, but they're better than Crocs, they're better than flip-flops. My thought process is if you have all the stuff that you need, the essentials and some of the non-essentials that are more on the luxury-based side, then you can just focus on fishing. There's nothing worse than having to worry about, be like, do I have enough water? Do I have enough food? And then all the while you're trying to catch bass and you just want to focus on having fun. You want to have a good time on the river. So come prepared, have a good kayak that you know you can trust, that's stable, that is lightweight, that fits all of your equipment. And I can almost guarantee you will have an amazing float and an amazing time. It's one of my favorite ways to fish, and I think we're gonna probably do another one of these floats very, very soon on a different stretch of river in Texas or maybe somewhere else, and that's where you guys should come into play. Let me know in the comment section below, what is a river we should float next? And maybe, just maybe, we'll make it happen. But for now, I'm Peace Not signing out. Hopefully you guys get inspired to go on your own river float. Be sure to be safe, bring a life vest, make a checklist, and most importantly, go crank 'em wieners. Anyway, I'm Peace Not signing out. Thank you guys for watching. We'll catch you in the next one, and as always, folks, keep fishing, never stop.